The Living Zen-podcast is a gift from the members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre to you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to let your friends know about Living Zen. If you'd like to support our community, here are a few ways that you can do it. Download the Living Zen podcast app for iPod, iPhone, or Android. You can also purchase additional Zen Talks by Venerable Eshu on iTunes or Amazon.com. One of the most meaningful ways to show your support is by joining our Sangha as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen podcast and our online e-Zendo will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at www.zenwest.ca and click on the membership tab. Thank you for your support. Mumonkan Case 48, Kanfeng's One Road. A monk asked priest Kanfeng, Bhagavats in the 10 directions, one straight road to nirvana. I wonder where that road is. Kanfeng lifted up his staff, drew a line in the air, and said, Here it is. Later, a monk asked Yunmen about this. Yunmen held up his fan and said, This fan jumps up to the heaven of the 33 and strikes the nose of the deity Shakradevendra. The carp of the eastern sea sweeps its tail once, and the rain comes down in torrents. Wu Men says, One goes deep, deep to the bottom of the sea, and winnows in the mud and pumps up the sand. The other goes high, high to the top of the mountain, and raises foaming waves that spread over the entire sky. Maintaining, releasing, each using but one hand, they safeguard the vehicle of the Tao. They are like two children running from different directions and crashing into each other. In this world, no one can grasp the truth in its entirety. In the view of the true eye, even these two ancient worthies do not know the road. Wu Men's verse says, Before you take a step, you are already there. Before your tongue has moved, your teisho is finished. Though your every move is ahead of the last, remember the vast, all-encompassing crater. Okay. So this is case 48 of the Mumonkan, which is the final case. So here on the first sit of 2012, we reached the last case of the Mumonkan. It's been, I think, almost a whole year of giving talks, maybe even more than a year, on the Mumonkan. But each one of these cases is pointed at this great matter. Right at the beginning, Wu Men points out that he's laid down these 48 cases not in any particular order. So when we're investigating this way, it's not that we should try to get through these cases one by one, beginning at the beginning and ending at the ending. There's no way of ranking each case as sort of higher or lower than the other. I always like to look at the Mumonkan as a pharmacist's cupboard. Each of us comes with difficulties. Each of us comes with obstacles, I guess you could say, places where we stick. And so the Mumonkan is like a medicine cabinet. And sometimes as we go through it, when we look at a case, sometimes they're transparent, that as soon as we read it, as soon as we connect with it, we know in our hearts and our bodies through our own experience of life and practice what this case is pointing at, the principle. If we can go back to the meaning, the literal meaning of koan, a public case, is like the term comes from law, right? So it's a public case in which a principle or a law has been demonstrated. The essence of something or something which isn't quite graspable is pointed to. And if we're able to grasp what's being pointed to, then we understand what's going on. So, we come to Kanfeng. Kanfeng, just to sort of put him in his historical context, was a disciple of Dongshan, which in Japanese is Tozan, and so he was a Dharma brother of Kaoshan, which in Japanese is Sozan. So Tozan and Sozan, and these are the two master and disciple from whom what we call the Soto sect, or the Kaodong in Chinese sect, arises from. So this is sort of right at the foundation of what we call the Soto sect. I don't want to spend too much time on that because I'm not such a big fan of, I'm not a sectist, I guess you could say. A lot of time is spent on talking about the big differences, Rinzai school and Soto school and Unmon or Yunmen school, which is interesting because Yunmen is also in this case. And oftentimes they're played off of one another as if like they were football teams or something like this. And, you know, we approach Buddhism or we approach Zen and we kind of go like, I'm a this team kind of a guy, or I'm a that team kind of a gal, and we sort of put on the jersey or something like that and go, oh, rah, rah. And the point is that all of these schools go back to one founder, which is Shakyamuni Buddha, but even more importantly than that, it goes back to this simple path, this simple concern, which is awakening itself, liberation. And when I first started practicing, I was in Victoria, and I was really really into Zen, and I didn't have a lot of resources available to me. So one day I was walking down Government Street, and to my surprise, walking the other way was a nun, a Chan nun, a Western, but dressed in full Chinese monastic attire. And so I kind of walked by her, and I kind of shook my head and was like, really, did that just happen? Did I just walk by a Chan nun? So I couldn't take it, so I turned around and kind of ran back up the street and kind of hijacked her whole day. Her name was Kun Li Shi, and she's actually from Canada originally, I think, and she was in town taking care of some business. And we had this great conversation. I was just starting up in practice. And one of the big questions that I had, which is, I think, maybe it's not a great question, but it's a very common question for people who are just starting out practice. We're looking at differences. So one of the questions I asked her was, in the school of Buddhism that you practice, do you sit facing the wall or do you sit facing the room? And this was like, I was shopping, and I think I identified with a particular school. So I was kind of, trying to put her in a box, whether she was like on the team I wanted to play for or not, right? And Chan nuns. So she kind of looked me up and down and said, it's like we have a telescope and you're looking in one end and I'm looking in the other. And this statement kind of stuck with me throughout my practice, and now I think I have a better idea of what it was that she was talking about. And that's what I'm trying to point to when I talk about these things. We say the Rinzai school is the school that's primarily focused with koans. And I think that there was a period of time in which that was almost a true statement, and almost the Rinzai school got too obsessed with creating a curriculum of koan study. And the objective of the Rinzai school came to be successfully passing these koans. It was like a checkpoint system. But it got so systematized that it ceased to carry the function of what, in my opinion, these cases were meant to do, which was to be medicines appropriately dispensed when an illness presented itself. Not some kind of a by rote learning system that a person would sort of just start at the beginning and go through until you're finished. And when you're finished, you get your diploma of enlightenment or something like this, and off you go to be a great Zen master somewhere. And it got to the point, and still I think in many Japanese temples in Japan, training centers, it got to the point where actually there's the koan system with the Mumonkan and the Blue Cliff Record and a couple other collections of cases. And then each student also has a collection of what are called capping verses. So they're sort of like poetical responses to cases. And you don't actually know which case the response is to. And so rather than coming up with spontaneous responses to cases, the idea in your training is to determine through your practice which of these verses goes with which of these cases, and present those instead of having to sort of come up with your own. Likewise, the Soto school, the silent illumination, is or shikantaza, as it's called in Japanese, and there's this assumption that that's the Soto school's thing, and the Soto school doesn't get involved in cases, and the Soto school practices only shikantaza. But this is just a lie. All of these practices didn't suddenly arise as these branches of Buddhism broke out. Individual teachers particularly focused on them, or maybe spent some time talking or even writing about particular practices. And disciples, followers, later sort of seem to emphasize these individual practices, sort of diminishing their teachers, their ancestors, by turning them into one-trick ponies. And the truth is, if you look at these Rinzai teachers, you find that their toolkit is complete. That it's not always about case after case after case. That the practice that was engaged in was very much silent illumination. A problem would arise, they would go to their teacher and ask a question, and the teacher would make a teaching. And sometimes it was a blow with a stick, sometimes it was a question, sometimes it was to recall a case from the past, an interaction between two old worthies, as they're called, or what we would call today a koan. The toolbox is complete. When we go to the Soto side, when we go to the Soto school, and we look at the Japanese, sort of like the big guy in Japan who's Dogen, it's not as if he doesn't recall the cases of old masters. In fact, he was quite a prolific writer, And if you look at his record, they're riddled throughout the Shobogenzo. They're riddled throughout. I mean, he used case after case after case. So this idea that koans are not a part of the Soto school is also a myth. We have one body. Originally, the disciples of the Buddha, that's what they were called, was the Shakyans, was the sort of term that was given to the disciples of Buddha. And for me, I really like to sort of return to this perspective. Shakyans, whether we're talking about the Theravadan monks of Sri Lanka or Thailand, or the Korean monks, or the Tibetan monks, or the Zen monks, they're all family members, each of them employing different techniques, but the fundamental point, or the most important critical foundation, is that this practice is aimed at awakening, liberation. So, here we have in the final case of the Mumonkan, this book of 48 koans, ostensibly of the Rinzai school, we have a master from the foundation of the Soto school. Not so pure, not so clear-cut. A monk asked the priest Kanfeng, "Bhagavats in the 10 directions, one straight road to nirvana. I wonder where that road is." So he's quoting a sutra. He's quoting a line from a sutra, the Surangama Sutra. Bhagavats in the 10 directions, one straight road to nirvana. And there's lots of ways that we can interpret this. We can say, Bhagavat is it's one of the names of the Buddha. It means like Holy One. So holy ones in the 10 directions. 10 directions, as we've spoken about before, it's like in every direction. And it kind of includes like expanding outwards and contracting inwards. It's representative also of time, past and future. Usually the phrase is like 10 directions and the 3 worlds, past, present, future. 10 directions is like, I always picture like a sphere that's kind of like expanding is one direction and contracting. So the north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, that's like 8. And then expansion out, contraction in. Okay, so holy ones in the 10 directions, one straight road to nirvana. So one way that we can understand this is that for all of these holy ones in the 10 directions, there is only one road to awakening. Now this maybe is a pure sort of reading of it, but I think it stinks and it's dangerous, because this is kind of the path of the fundamentalist, where we say, there's only one way for everybody. The other way of reading this, which I think is more in line with the perspective of the Zen school, reminds me of a song, but Bhagavats in the 10 directions. Everywhere that you look, in every direction that you look, anywhere that you go is one path. There's only one path. There's only one place to walk. There are Buddhas in every direction. It's not as if we can make a choice and walk away from this opportunity to awaken. Each and every thing that we do, each and every activity that we engage in is the path, not a path, the path. Everywhere that we go and everything that we do. The one straight road to nirvana. Nirvana refers to, it's not a synonym of heaven. It's not like this place that we're going to. Nirvana literally means blowing out or extinction. And the idea is that we're constantly engaged in this cycle, this activity of samsara. We're constantly engaged in this activity of climbing up a karmic ladder to pleasure, falling down the karmic wheel to suffering over and over and over and over and over and over again. And we can look at this like sort of as a cosmology, a lifetime after lifetime, but I think it's more helpful in the Zen school to look at this from a perspective of thought moment to thought moment. So, from this perspective, every activity that we engage in, everything that we do, everywhere that we go, we have this opportunity, we have this choice, which is between the world of samsara, where we posit a self who is engaged in the world of good and bad, the world of gain and loss, the world of pain and pleasure. Or we manifest in the world of nirvana, relinquishing, letting go of this fixated notion of I am, letting go of this idea of separation, space, distance between subject and object. We immerse ourselves in the realization of praticca samutpada, the codependent or interdependent origination. And to do so, thought moment after thought moment, in each situation, is to pass through the gate, the doorway of nirvana. So, this monk asks priest Kanfeng, Bhagavat's in the 10 directions, one straight road to nirvana. I wonder where that road is. Kanfeng lifted up his staff, drew a line in the air and said, here it is. And so it's easy to get caught up with Kanfeng. It's easy to get caught up with his staff. It's easy to get caught up with the line in the air. Sometimes people argue about whether it was an up and down line, like a vertical line, or it was a horizontal line. And people say, well, in China, in Chinese, the horizontal line is 1. It's the character for 1. So he was trying to indicate something about that. Maybe so. But I think it was what's more important is here it is. Where is this road to nirvana? We can spend our whole lives looking for heaven, looking for the holy place, the holy land, the place where we're free from our suffering. Rinzai is always reprimanding his monks for chasing masters and chasing mountains, going hither and yon, looking for the way, looking for the Buddha. And Rinzai says, it's right here, you blind idiot. Right in front of you is the way. If you're looking for Buddha, you need to stop running around and realize there is no Buddha other than this very self manifesting in this moment. This is Kanfeng's response. Later, a monk, and some people say this same monk, asked Yunmen. I haven't investigated the historical possibility. I don't even know if these were contemporaries. But the monk asked Yunmen about this. This is Yunmen who we've run into a few times. Yunmen is a very colorful Zen character, and you never know what you're going to get with Yunmen. There is the case in which someone asks him, what is Buddha? And he responds, a dry stick of shit. So you don't know. And so this time, Yunmen is asked this same question. So the sutra says, Bhagavat's in the 10 directions, one straight road to nirvana. I wonder where that road is. Yunmen held up his fan and said, this fan jumps up to the heaven of the 33 and strikes the nose of the deity Shakradevandra. The carp of the eastern sea sweeps its tail once, and the rain comes down in torrents. And I have a hard time reading this without kind of chuckling, because it's like, if you can picture this old Chinese Zen master who uses the most earthy kind of methods to espouse or to expound the Dharma, suddenly coming up with this really sort of Indian, colorful metaphor, we can gain some insight into what's going on here. So the fan is sort of one of the tools of a Zen teacher. And a master will often have a fan or a stick, or what's hosu in Japanese, which is like a fly whisk. And generally they use these as tools, and kind of it also helps us to have some indication of where this question is being asked. It's usually in the evening talk where monks are allowed to sort of approach the master and ask these kinds of questions, and they'll respond. So we shouldn't, when we're looking at a response like this, we shouldn't look at it as a strictly linear, intellectual, conceptual sort of response. It's not like a university professor being asked a question about something and providing an answer which the people can then jot down. The response is an embodied performance almost, or just an embodied manifestation whole. So Kanfeng just raises his staff and draws a line. There it is. And Yunmen says, I can just picture him with this fan. This fan jumps up to the heaven of the 33 and strikes the nose of the deity Shakradevandra. So the heaven of the 33, this is a totally Indian cosmological sort of reference, which refers to the highest peak of Mount Sumeru, upon which this deity Shakradevandra, it's another name for Indra, the god Indra, the Indian god Indra, sort of oversees all of the cosmos, and with the assistance of 32 devas, sort of runs things. And I was thinking about going to Mount Maguire this afternoon. I've heard there's a beautiful view, 360-degree view, and this is the image that is being put across here. This great peak with this great being. This fan, which is the manifestation of the hand, of the activity of Yunmen. This fan can go to the highest peak, to the highest God, the overseer of all of the cosmos, and slap him in the nose. He talks about the carp of the eastern sea sweeping its tail once, and the rain comes down in torrents. The Chinese metaphor is like overturning a tray full of water. So it's just this referring to this great. This is kind of I think a Chinese sort of myth about how rain comes. It's like to Western kids, sometimes they say like thunder is like God bowling or something like this. It's the same kind of thing. The eastern carp of the eastern sea sweeps its tail, and the heavens just sort of shower water. Okay, this is a really colorful case. To understand what's taking place and why Mumonkan puts these two pieces together, puts these two teachers, aside from the question being the same, it's very important to understand what's being bookended in this case. He sort of points at it a little bit more in his comment. One goes deep, deep to the bottom of the sea, and winnows in the mud and pumps up the sand. The other goes high, high to the top of the mountain and raises foaming waves that spread over the entire sky. Maintaining and releasing. Okay, I'm going to stop there and just talk. So, throughout these talks on the Mumonkan, one of the fundamental underlying sort of themes that I speak about over and over again are these two fundamental activities. One that my own teacher and I've come to use the term of minus, the dissolving activity, in which the subjective differences are allowed to melt, to dissolve, until we manifest, till we realize, till we experience the manifestation of complete zero, emptiness, shunyata, returning to the first case, the focus of the first case of the Mumonkan, mu, without. The second activity is the plus activity, the manifestation activity, arising, coming to completeness in distinction, being able to identify completely all manner of things. But the completion of the minus activity remembers its origin, and so does not look upon this differentiation as separateness. This activity I speak about over and over again as being dynamic, flowing in both directions simultaneously. And we talk about this activity in reference to the breath as well. So minus activity as we exhale, dissolving completely. We notice that as we come to the bottom of the exhale, there's just this moment of pause, a moment of completion in which we can no longer breathe out. We can no longer exhale. The inhalation has not yet taken place, not yet begun, and there is this brief pause. And then, without will, this in-breathing takes place, this arising activity. The plus activity begins to manifest. We breathe in. And then, coming fully to the top of the in-breath, we find that once again, we reach this place of balance, of pause, where we can no longer breathe in anymore, but the exhalation has not begun. The completion of the manifestation. There's nowhere else to go. Having fully come to completion, there's only one activity which can take place, the minus activity. What these two teachings, these two perspectives are paired here in this case to demonstrate these two positions. One, as Wumen says here in the beginning, deep to the bottom of the sea, pointing at Kanfeng, who, having completely emptied out, completely returned to the origin, dissolved to absolute zero. Where is the path? How do you manifest from this position, what is the activity? There's only one thing to do. There's only one activity to take. Coming from absolute zero, looking at absolute plus, the whole path is revealed. Likewise, when we look at Yunmen, he is manifesting the position, the pole of absolute plus, coming into completion with all things in this universe, nothing other than myself, in clear distinction, master of all, the Chakravadin, the great wheel-turning king. We recognize that there is nothing outside of the realm, the manifestation of absolute plus. The reason that they're paired here, the reason that they're put together here, is because it gives us as practitioners a view of the complete expanse of what our Dharma practice entails. We're always focused on what we're doing, how we can get the next thing, how we can accomplish the next thing, how we can continue our practice in this and that way. This case exists. This case is a pointer to show us the vastness of the experience of this activity. Wumen says, maintaining, releasing. You can also say like arising and dissolving. You can say grasping and releasing, even drawing in, receiving activity, and expanding activity. Each using but one hand, they safeguard the vehicle of the Tao. Each manifesting one sort of bracket, they contain the entire activity of the Dharma, activity of the cosmos, plus and minus. They're like two children running from different directions and crashing into each other. This is a this is a really wonderful metaphor. Joshi Roshi always talks about these two activities. He sort of genderfies them, and I really try to avoid that. And I just want to sort of give a touch of what he talks about. And it doesn't matter to me which you prefer to identify, but he talks about them like lovers or like partners. Like we can look at them like even yin and yang. Just that these two activities sort of move apart from each other, move away from one another until they get as far as can be got. Yeah? And then coming to completion in this activity, they turn around and face one another and begin to go home. They begin to return. This activity begins to come together, and then they meet. And if you ever listen to Teisho by Joshi Roshi, he spends 90% of his time talking about this single point, this single activity, the realization of this activity, to grasp this, to see this, to experience this in your life and activity is the very foundation of Zen practice. Wumen uses the term, they're like two children running from different directions and crashing into each other. And this conjures up two images for me. One is a really kind of an unpleasant one involving like chipped teeth and stuff like that. And the other is one that's delightful and I think really captures the joy of this meeting, of coming from two places. And that's If you ever go to a fair, there's lots of them, it seems, on the island, the Luxton Fair, and the one ride that seems to always have a huge lineup is the bumper cars. And there's just something that's so, I don't know why people like it so much, but to come from two different places, further apart the better, and to just plow into each other. There's a great joy in this. And this is what Mumonkan is pointing to, that the attraction between these two poles, the inevitability of these two extremes meeting, passing through, and continuing on their journey to the other pole. Yeah? So this body, this activity beginning at the pole, you could say, of absolute plus, begins to engage in the minus activity. The activity, the position at the absolute minus begins to manifest the plus activity. And of course, they meet. But upon meeting, they don't turn around. They continue through one another, continuing this activity until they manifest the absolute plus, absolute minus. This complete activity is the cosmos, plus and minus. It's not one following the other in some kind of cycle, but these activities happen simultaneously in each moment. Okay. In this world, Mumonkan says, no one can grasp the truth in its entirety. This is a very important point. This is for me, one of the most wonderful aspects or teaching of Zen, which is to say, when we stand up in our position, when we manifest as a person, when we voice an opinion, we cannot know the whole sphere. We have necessarily stepped out of the absolute, stepped out of unification to open our mouths, to take a step, to lift an arm. This single point is of great importance as we go forward as practitioners of the way. That whenever we stand up, whenever we take a perspective, that we recognize that it is not the complete picture. And Mumonkan even goes so far as, after sort of praising, as much as Mumonkan will praise something, praising these two old teachers for their clear manifestation, their clear representation of these two completely ripened aspects of the Dharma activity. He says, in the view of the true eye, even these two ancient worthies do not know the road. Even these two ancient worthies can't contain the truth. They can't hold it. They can't own it. They can't completely possess the whole path. And I think it's fair to say that we can also throw Mumonkan in there as well. Neither can you, buddy. And neither can I. And neither can you. And that's the wonderful basis that motivates us in practice. It's not depressing. I hope it's not depressing for you. I hope it's not discouraging. I hope that you haven't set out in this practice of the way so that you can completely own the truth. For me, this is inspiring, energizing. Always more to go. Wu Men's verse says, before you take a step, you're already there. This path, where is this one straight road to nirvana? Before you take a step, you're already there. This very activity which is unfolding before you is the gate, is the road, is the path. As I say over and over and over again, there's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to do. Before your tongue has moved, your teisho is finished. If we're able to immerse ourselves, to awaken to the unfolding activity of the Dharma as this very moment, what is there to say? Certainly, we've had the experience of listening to a piece of music, birds singing. We've had the opportunity to view a gorgeous expanse in the company of somebody else, and found ourselves meeting eyeball to eyeball, overwhelmed by the experience, and find that there is nothing worth saying. That moment, that activity, intimately shared, already it's complete, already it's enough. Once we open our mouths, we've killed it. This last part is sort of a parting advice. Though your every move is ahead of the last, remember the vast, all-encompassing crater. In practice, we're always moving forward, clarifying this great matter, awakening. We can look back and talk about progress that has been made. But the Wu Men reminds us to consider this in the vastness of the Dharma activity, the vastness of this cosmos. It's like a little star glimpsed from billions of miles away in the just vacuous emptiness of space. We go about our way of liberation, this path of awakening, each moment becoming more and more aware, becoming more and more engaged and immersed in the activity of our lives. But this practice, this awakening, is limitless. It's bottomless. This is the message. When I spoke about the 4 Bodhisattva vows some time ago, this is the same underlying theme. That when we engage in this practice of awakening, that we not turn it into some kind of pursuit of a finishing line. That we look for some kind of tangible goal that we can wrap our hand around and say, I have realized the Bodhisattva way. But to recognize that this way of the Bodhisattva, the way of an awakening being, is an activity. It is a way. It is Tao. It's a path. that resides right before us in each moment and is endless. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.